Welcome back to my channel for part 2 of the Mike and Mae Road saga. So we've heard the conversation from Brian Smith, and what we'll do now is I'll just go through some of the research that I've come across, and basically I'll be just putting up the question, is it a legal road? Is it followed the procedures? Now, I did mention at the end of the last video Republic Act number 107. I said 3.2. It's actually 5.2. It was a bit difficult to read, but I had a look at it, and it's 5.2. And this is an act facilitating the acquisition of right-of-way, site or location for national government infrastructure projects. Now, is this a government infrastructure project? Who actually owns Barangay Road? So who is responsible for road construction in the Philippines? Who owns the Barangay Road? The DPWH, the Department of Public Works and Highways, is responsible for national roads and barangay roads, while the DLG, whoever that is, Department of Local Government probably, is the competent authority for provincial, city and municipal roads. So Brian Smith said this is a barangay road, so that comes under the Department of Public Works and Highways, and it's a national, or what we would say federal, so they would be making a national project. Now, they have certain rules and regulations as to how roads are created. Now, from what I read out earlier, Section 4 of this Republic Act number 10752, Section 4, modes of acquiring real property. The government may acquire real property needed as right-of-way site or location for any national government infrastructure project through donation, negotiated sale, expropriation, then he goes on to say if the person they're dealing with is not the actual owner of the land, there's different ways to go about it, which look like they're a bit more longer-winded than the normal process. Then it says the implementing agency may utilise donation or similar mode of acquisition if the landowner is a government-owned or government-controlled corporation. So, if government wants the land, it's a government organisation, government department, and it's owned by another government department or a government-owned or controlled corporation, then they can use donation. So what that does is just bypasses the requirement to for land valuations and certain taxes, and so it's just basically a swap from one department to another. So that leaves negotiated sale and expropriation. So unless there's some abstract, obscure sort of law that I couldn't find, that's the only other two ways that you can acquire land. Negotiated sale, well, Brian Smith said it's definitely not that. There was no negotiation, no sale, no money paid, which only leaves expropriation. So expropriation is eminent domain. So just have here just a definition for expropriation, the action by the state or an authority of taking property from its owner for public use or benefit, the action of dispossessing someone of property. So that's eminent domain. Now, when you use, well, Bryan Smith said it was an eminent domain. So it's got to be one of the three processes, and if it's not donation, which is government to government, it's not negotiated sale, and it's not expropriation or eminent domain, then how can you obtain that land if that's how the law says you can gain that land? Now, if we just go a little bit further on down to section 6, guidelines for expropriation proceedings. Whenever it is necessary to acquire real property for the right-of-way, site or location of any national government infrastructure through expropriation, the appropriate implementing agency, which can only be the barangay here because they're the only ones that got involved by the sound of it, so whenever it is necessary to acquire real property for the right-of-way, site or location for any national government infrastructure through expropriation, the appropriate implementing agency through the Office of Solicitor General, the Office of Government Corporate Counsel, and their deputised government or private legal counsel shall immediately initiate the expropriation proceedings before the proper court under the following guidelines. 1. You file the complaint. Anytime thereafter and after due notice, the defendant, who would be the person wanting the land or the agency wanting the land, the implementing agency shall immediately deposit to the court in favour of the owner the amount equivalent to the sum of 100% of the value of the land based on the current relevant zonal valuation of the Bureau of Internal Revenue, issued not more than 3 years prior to the filing of the expropriation complaint, subject to sub-regulation C of the section. So, okay, Bryan Smith said it's not eminent domain, but there's no other way to get the land. So, what they're saying is if you go through eminent domain expropriation, you have to pay compensation. Now, where does that come from? This is from Republic Act 8974. An act to facilitate the acquisition of right-of-way, site or location for national government infrastructure projects and for other purposes. Section 1 of this Declaration of Policy, Article 3, Section 9 of the Constitution states that private property shall not be taken for public use without just compensation. Towards this end, the state shall ensure the owners of real property acquired for national government infrastructure projects are promptly paid compensation. So, you can't take anyone's property by any means whatsoever under the Philippine Constitution without paying compensation. And none of these landowners it's never been mentioned that any of them have got compensation. Bryan Smith did say give them a few pesos here and there and to persuade them, but that's not compensation, and the compensation has to be a valuation done by an authorised body through the BIR. So that certainly wasn't done. Now, let's have a look at this. So we've got the Constitution, Article 3, which is the Bill of Rights. And what have we got? Section 9. And this states, Section 9, this is all it states: private property shall not be taken for public use without just compensation. So it doesn't give any exemptions. It says that a compensation must be given. So under the Constitution, that has to occur. So you can't take anyone's property without paying compensation, no matter how you take it. So basically, yeah, the person wanting the land has to go and it's got to go before the courts, the appropriate court, and the court then makes a decision on the expropriation. You get a value of the land, has to be done. You've got to go through then, and that money, 100% of that valuation has to be deposited in a bank account, and it goes through and tells you who you can put that money with. So also you got to take into account any improvements and structures. So being a rice field, that'd be an improvement because it has a value. So it earns an income, so that has to be also taken into consideration for the valuation. He's gone through a rice field. So that's then it goes through what the process is, and if the property owner doesn't like the valuation, they can take it to court to have it reviewed, and they've got 60 days to do that, and so on and so on. So it is a process which doesn't appear to have been followed. Doesn't appear that they've used any of the recognised ways of taking land from private people, and it doesn't appear that they paid any compensation whatsoever. So excuse me. What else we got here? Ecological and environmental concerns. Now, in cases involving acquisition of right-of-way sites, the location of any national government infrastructure project, the implementing agency must take into account the ecological and environmental impact. I very much doubt if that was that occurred. Now you got public-private partnerships. Excuse me. Usually, what would happen is the government agency would build the road or the infrastructure that's needed, but they do have public-private partnerships, PPPs, but that's usually when it's it's like a electric company. It's going to build a power plant, or need the land, put power lines across or whatever. So it's usually a corporation for public use, like the electric company, maybe for Wi-Fi towers, that sort of thing. Not Joe Blow citizen. And in section 12 here, it says sanctions, which is an interesting thing. Violation of any provision of this act shall means will, subject the government official or employee concerned to appropriate administrative, civil or is concerned to appropriate administrative, civil or criminal sanctions, including suspension or dismissal from the government service and forfeiture of benefits in accordance with the provision of the law. So anyone that doesn't follow the procedures, government officials can suffer the consequences. So that is Republic Act number 10752. That's pretty much what I'm going to give you. Construction and maintenance of barangay roads. Here is all barangay roads when accepted. So when approval has been granted, must be inventorised by the barangay chairman and verified by barangay engineers in order that funds may be appropriated for their maintenance. So basically, once at least, I'm sure it'd have to be surveyed before you actually put in an application for the Barangay Road to be constructed. Then, once it is approved, the engineers then have to do a maintenance schedule, so for costings, so that they know what the road's going to cost them to maintain every year. So, is the road legal? From what I can do, and I've read quite a bit, it doesn't appear that the proper procedures were followed. It doesn't appear that they've used a process that is recognised as a legal process for taking private land. It doesn't appear that the owners were given compensation, and the Constitution says, Section 9, private property shall, which means can't, be taken for public use without just compensation. And that compensation has to be the value of the land as deemed by a certified valuer through the BIR, and not just any Joe Blow. So that money then, with the application to take that land, the value, 100% of the value of that money must be then deposited, so then it can be given to the landowner. And under eminent domain, the project can't be started until it's approved. So, is it a legal road? Leave it to you to decide whether you think it is or not. Doesn't really matter what we think. Depends what if anyone wants to. Any of the landowners want to claim compensation. It'd be interesting if, say, they all got together and took it to court for compensation. Who would be liable? Would it be the barangay, seeing their officials got involved? Would it be Mike and Mae, because it's their property now? Or would it be Mike and Mae and Brian Tubbs, because Brian Tubbs was also involved at the time when the road was put through? So that'd be an interesting thing to follow. Thanks for listening. Thanks for if you got to this far. Subscribe, hit the thumbs up, thumbs down, and share. And see you on the next video. Thank you.